Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My name is Warren, and I will be your host for this conversation with Mr. Mark Ryan, triathlon coach extraordinaire.
Anybody who is training, all we do is work on just generally improving your fitness over time.
Mark is someone who takes his coaching very seriously. If there's a qualification out there, he's got it. British Triathlon Level 3 accredited coach, that is the top level within that organisation. Plus, he's got run qualifications from the best in the business and the swim qualifications too, with the likes of Swim Smooth and others. On top of that, he's even a qualified lifesaver. So if you got stuck in the pool and Mark was there, he'd be the first one to pluck you out. Nothing to worry about. I first met Mark when he helped me out with a much needed swimming session that paid huge dividends for an Ironman that I was training for at the time. And we've kept in touch ever since because I just love his philosophy and his approach to coaching and to training. Because really where he focuses is on how can athletes and anyone training for a goal enjoy their training more? And also, how can you make the most of the time that you have for that training and maximize the results from it? Two things we all want more of in life: enjoyment and time. This is what this conversation is about. It's what you're going to learn about from Mark here. He really delivers on all fronts with this. And as ever, this episode is sponsored by 33 Fuel Natural Sports Nutrition. The greatest, tastiest, most delightful, best value, all natural sports nutrition you will find anywhere for your performance. Do go and check it out. That's at 33fuel.com. And in the meantime, enjoy this conversation with Mr. Mark Ryan. Mark, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. Really good to see you again. And excited to get stuck into two things we know everyone wants more of, which is enjoyment and time. So in the kicking ourselves off with the world of enjoyment, and specifically the world of enjoyment with regard sports training and triathlon, how do you see that as a key element that maybe people overlook and something that can be worked on a bit harder for more results?
Yeah, I guess, enjoyment for me is a really powerful one. So, I know from my journey in triathlon and anything I do that if I don't enjoy it, then I'm really not going to stick with it. If I don't like something at all, I just give up on it and don't really want to continue. So I think that if somebody enjoys something, then they're more likely to stick with it. And I did look at some research actually to see about the power of enjoyment. And there's not really a whole great deal out there, but there are some studies on children that say, if they really enjoy what they do in a sports session, then they're much likely to continue in participation. And, we know from triathlon that consistency is the key to success. So, if you're enjoying what you do and you're going to participate more, that gives you that consistency. And that's going to, that's the key to progression of your fitness. So, the more you enjoy something, the more you're going to stick with it, the fitter you're going to get. Nobody wants to, and it's not really a good way to train if you're doing a hard session, then you're too tired to train for a couple of days, and then you do the same thing again. You just don't progress. So that enjoyment and consistency, it just underpins everything that I believe in as a triathlon coach.
And so for that kind of recovery side, because there's a masochistic element to triathlon, which is also perversely, probably the right word, enjoyable. The pain is a part of it.
Yes.
But I think if it goes too far, no pain, no gain. Sometimes you need to be rough on yourself, but sometimes you need to be kind on yourself. And how do you see that playing out in terms of maximizing the enjoyment while balancing those two, the forces of, pushing yourself and gritting through the stuff that sometimes you don't want to do it, but you'll feel better afterwards, and also making sure that you're growing and developing and improving your fitness as an athlete?
Yeah, for me, it's about knowing the purpose of the session that you're actually going to do. So, again, a lot of people I work with, that's exactly the way they want to train. They just want to go hard all the time. And at the beginning, I spend a lot of time working with them in trying to get them to go slower the majority of the time. And, I refer to that a lot as the guilty zone, because down there at that easy level, people think they're not getting any fitter at all, but there's a real benefit, lots of physical benefits to training at that lower level. So for me, it's about knowing the purpose of the session that you're actually going to do. So yes, there's you're right. Just because training is enjoyable doesn't mean to say it's all easy. You're not, you haven't got your feet out when you're cycling down a hill the whole time. You need work, and you need to stress your body to progress. But it's about a mixture of those sessions that can really help people to progress. And like I said, if you know the purpose of the session, so if you've done a really hard session, the next day it's a really easy session. If you know the purpose of it, you'll enjoy it. You know that you can't just keep going hard all the time because your body will break down and you'll get injured. So if you know what you're doing, again, you're more likely to enjoy the session.
I love that point about the guilty zone. I've never heard it called that before.
I'm sure I must have mentioned that to you before. So I mention it to every single athlete. It's called the guilty zone because down at that easy level, the physical benefits that you can get from your training is to develop your mitochondria, which are the things, the little, wickies in your body that help produce energy. And only if you go at that easy pace do you actually build the volume of them. And then when you do the hard training, you make each one of those mitochondria much more efficient. So if you go hard all the time and you spend all your time making the amount that you've got much more efficient, you need to spend time building the volume of them as well. So, it is hard for people when they first start training with me. And I say to them, right, this is your easy pace, go really slowly. And they go, I couldn't do that. Either it was such a slow pace, I was walking, or I just felt guilty. I felt like I should be running faster. So yeah, referring to it as a guilty zone makes people recognize it when they get there. And I tell them not to feel guilty, that it's doing you a lot of benefit for your training.
So it's balancing that out against the harder sessions. And is there a risk as well of people falling into the middle ground, i.e., particularly uncoached athletes or self-coached athletes in the earlier stages? I don't want to go in the guilty zone, so I'm going to go a bit harder. So I
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing something.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm not going 8 out of 10-ish. Therefore, I might not be getting the top end benefit either. Is there a no man's land in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research out there, and it's described. I think there's many polarized training, which is very popularized by Steven Seiler. So lots of YouTube clips on there. You can have a look at and watch him talk about. So he talks a lot about doing the really easy stuff and then doing the really hard stuff as well to get that benefit from it, and training either really easy or really hard. I have a kind of slightly different approach because that I think that model works really, really well for elite athletes who spend a lot of their time at the easy pace and then, spend a bit of their time at the hard pace. But, for mere mortals who maybe sat down at our desks working all day, if you suddenly then, get changed and go really, really hard, you're very likely to get injured. So what I do is I try and, progress to that model over time. So we start by the easy stuff and then maybe in the middle ground. Maybe just below threshold for the intervals, that builds up some resilience, and then you increase that to maybe the threshold zone. So you're increasing, so this would stay pretty much as it is, the easy stuff, and then you would increase the intensity and frequency of those interval sessions over time when your body's more resilient to do it. So we work to get to that model over time, only when you know that your body can handle it.
I think that's a really good point, and particularly coming out of lockdown, a lot of people that have necessarily been less mobile. Even if you are active and training, if you commuted to work before, there was the walk to the station, there was the walk out for lunch, there was the walk to your office and back. A lot of us have potentially been spending a whole time in our houses, a lot less daily movement, which could increase injury risk if you suddenly just went hard straight out of the blocks. So being aware of that sounds really smart.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, before, some people get out of bed, some of the older athletes I work with, and they need to do a bit of mobility work to get things moving, and even just making a cup of tea, packing your bag for work, and then, a little walk and things like that would actually get you nice and mobile. But if you're just getting out of bed and walking into the office, I mean, this is another bedroom in our house, which is our office now. And I literally walk from over there to here. So I might do 20 paces. And if I'm sat here most of the day and then go into my gym and do a workout, I'm very likely to get injured. So yes, a good warm up and cool down are always really good, but certainly just getting that resilience over time is absolutely essential for effective training. So I think there's a lot of studies that do say about these kind of extremes, but you have to be really careful because they're always designed for elite athletes. And if you've got to make sure that you're pragmatic about applying those techniques to, the age group athlete.
And just so people have a yardstick here in terms of these zones of intensity, how would you recommend people recognize them, whether that's through heart rate or perceived exertion? How would you describe the different levels of intensity that people should be considering within their training?
So do you mean the method of measuring them, or the different zones that there
So
are?
the different zones, as you know, as in you've sort of got your guilty zone or your steady state. You've got your your higher end work. How would you define the different zones, and how can people understand what they are easily in terms of measuring them for themselves?
It's a really good question. So yes, I think at the simplest sense, I mean, if you Google training zones, and I've talked about this quite a bit before, there's really 3 zones, but if you Google it, you can get up to 20 zones. If you talk about rate of perceived exertion, then it's normally a scale from 1 to 20. So you can have actually 20 different zones that you're actually training. But in the simplest format, you've got 3 zones. You've got your really easy pace up to it's called maximum, I can't remember what it's called now. I can never remember the term when I try and think about it. But basically, it's the first turn point of your body producing lactic acid. And it's the first point at which it starts to increase its volume. So your body's producing it and clearing it, and it gets to a steady state. After that point, it starts to go up a little bit, and then further up you get to your anaerobic threshold. So basically, you've got below the first point, in between the 2 points, and then above those. And we can put some links out afterwards, and I'm about to do a few videos actually explaining how to do these tests themselves, a series of how to do one in the swim, how to do the one in the bike, and how to do the one in the run, explaining the tests, how to set the zones, and then what the zones mean and how to apply them to your training. So I guess we can link to those as well,
Yeah, no,
so that people can have a look at them.
yeah, because I think a lot of people have an idea of the concept. Some people will know it inside out, but it's easy to take it for granted. I mean, I remember a sort of early description for me, coming from a running background, was your steady state lower zone work was conversational. You could still chat to the person next to you.
Yep.
Your in between state, it actually came out at like what was it, like something like 2 breaths per every footstep or something.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You've noticed that you can't really talk anymore. You can, but only in short bursts.
Yeah.
And everything above that where you can't talk was like that was your full gas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a method you can use for running to make sure
2 steps per breath, not 2 breaths per step. So for every step you took running, breathing cadence was about 2 breaths per step.
Right. Okay. Yep. There's a really good you can use nose breathing for really easy pace as well. I mean, most people have heard of that. So, not using your mouth at all, but breathing in and out through your nose. In fact, I've just been reading a book actually about how humans are actually supposed to breathe. And we were never actually supposed to breathe through our mouths. We were always supposed to breathe in and out through our nose. It's a slight aside, but a way to practice that really well. It's a really good tip for those people who snore. At night time, you can put a tiny bit of tape over your lips just to stop you from breathing through your mouth. And at night time, you can breathe in and out through your nose. And my wife loves it because I don't snore at all anymore now. I breathe in and out through my nose and I've stopped snoring. But it's a really good technique you can use when you're running, even just to breathe in and out through your nose. And it just stops you from running too fast. Because if you run too fast, you can't maintain it. So then you have to slow down a little bit as well.
Interesting. That's a handy little handbrake there, because I've often found that after a while, and particularly in summer, my nose gets a little bit blocked when I'm exercising hard, and that's the end of my nose breathing.
Oh, that's interesting because the air is supposed to be filtered by your nose anyway. So it's supposed to help people breathing, because you breathe in through your nose, it filters it properly, it cools the air, it warms the air up a little bit, and it's apparently the way that we're supposed to breathe anyway. So yeah, give it a try next time. You're right. It doesn't help if you've got hay fever. That's a slightly different situation. But yeah, it can help control the breathing. There's another technique as well that you can use, called MAF training. And it's developed by Phil Caffetone, so maximum aerobic function. And it's just a simple formula of 180 minus your age. And then you can alter it very slightly, whether you've been training for a long time or you're new to it. But that just gives you a heart rate that you can actually train at, and not let your heart go over that certain threshold. And that'll keep you running at a nice, easy pace.
And presumably as well, that would be I've know Phil Caffetone's work, and for anyone who hasn't come across him, he's certainly worth checking out. He is really a pioneer
Yes.
in triathlon, going back a long time. Was it? Come on, who was it he trained? I'm thinking Mark Allen.
Yeah, Mark Allen. Yeah, 6 times Ironman world champion. Yeah, so it's quite a pedigree.
Yeah, his training methods are quite well proven, to say the least.
Yes.
But no, he's very much on the slow down to go fast and build your aerobic base, get your body fat burning, and so that's very much allied to your thinking around people being in the guilty zone. It's not a guilty place to be; it's a great place to be.
Yes. So it's an interesting point, because sometimes when people do the heart rate training, what they do is they slow down and they only go easy. But it's really effective if you mix that with the interval sessions as well, because like I said, if you do the MAF training, the easy running, that builds the volume of mitochondria, and then the interval training would make each one of them more efficient at producing energy. So a combination of those two things actually works really well.
I can see that, and I imagine as well that you would see, if you were using a fixed heart rate based on the sort of MAF thinking, you've got 180 minus your age, that's your fixed maximum heart rate for running. You would see an increase in speed and efficiency. You're not just, your heart rate remains the same,
Yes.
but your running becomes faster over time, particularly if you're tying it in with those harder sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's exactly the way it works. I mean, if the principle, we call it training. So whatever you're doing, you're training your body to do something. And whatever intensity you want to train, you've got to train at or roughly about that intensity. So it's a good point. So if you're always going really fast, you'll never train that easy intensity. So if you've got to slow down, train at it, your body gets more efficient at being at that intensity. And for the same heart rate, you can then start to go faster. So nice. It is a really good, effective way. So for anybody who hates running and thinks I can never get fast, you can get a lot of benefit by just running easy, and then sprinkle in a little bit of the interval stuff, and you can really then just, take off. So yeah, it's a really good way for people to run.
And so to circle back on the enjoyment theme, while we're digging into all these different elements, are there any particular tricks? You mentioned the idea of having a focus for your session, knowing what you're doing for your session. But are there any other things that you found, ways to make training more enjoyable, or ways to help athletes who are making it unnecessarily uncomfortable to do their training?
I think it's always interesting when you work with different athletes, because what's the best phrase? In fact, I think this is one of your phrases. Everyone's an experiment of one. I heard that on your podcast, and I keep using that. But yeah, I work with some people, and all they want to do is the same sessions week in, week out, pretty much. And then other people would just get completely bored by that. So, and then what I have to do then is throw in that you can still help people to train in the right zone so they get the right progression, but we can try and mix it up and make the sessions a little bit more interesting. And one thing that, I love doing in swim training is that I try and make things a bit of a game. I mean, people love Zwift at the moment, and it's basically a way of just getting on your bike and just making it into a game. And that's really motivational as well. But if you can make a training session with a group of people, some kind of game, then, we're just like kids again. We enjoy what we're doing. We're all a bit competitive with triathletes, runners and swimmers. And then that can make the same session a lot more enjoyable.
That's a good point, that, because particularly as when we were kids running around in the playground, you didn't call it training,
Exactly, yeah.
and the same in sort of night clubbing periods. I remember being dripping in sweat and exhausted and still going, and I didn't call that training either. But I'm not sure the hydration procedures were up to scratch back then. But
Yeah,
I'm just
it's
saying
like,
it's exertion, right? And it should be enjoyment.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. You dance all night, you're not training, but you're still, you're still doing lots of exercise, and put that on your Garmin watch as well, and get credit for it on your training plan.
I don't know if that's going on Strava. It's going to be a wobbly line.
Yes, but no, to make anything a game, a bit of fun, things like that. It's just a really way for people to enjoy the training. We try and take things from one sport and put them into the other. So one thing we do in swim training, we haven't been able to do it for a while with COVID, is get everyone to start at one end of the pool, and then everybody has to swim down and then get back. And the last person who touches after you swam 50 meters is out, eliminated, a little bit like the track event. And then it's a game of you've got to go, you've got to do the intervals, but you've got to pace yourself as well. And it's just a really fun game that everybody loves, and it just makes training much more enjoyable.
I think there's a lot to be said for that crossover idea as well. It's Martin Yelling at Marathon Talk. He was talking in a show we did about, he likes cycling and stuff as well, and has plenty of friends who do. And the cafe stop is such a key part of cycling in normal times anyway, and good to have it back now. But it's not for runners. So he started incorporating, run routes where we can have a cafe stop.
Yeah.
And just make it a bit social. So, you might be sprinkling your training between people who are better than you or people who are not quite as quick, but you get that social element as well. I mean, I've found that helpful because it's harder to see people. It has been in the last year, but you can go out for a bike ride with just about anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, luckily, in lockdown, we've had things like Zoom, without, any video conferencing, then, life would have been a heck of a lot harder. But now we can do online classes, so people can join on Zoom. You can still have that group. I mean, there's no way it's the same as, being in the same building and having a chat with people before and afterwards. But, we'll do a little Zoom class, and then people can stay around and have a little chat at the end while they're putting all the kit away as well. And it just gives you a little bit of contact. Well, you can't actually get face to face with what's been going on in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And what about people? If we use that social element, what would you recommend for people? For example, a couple of friends want to meet. You've got an opportunity to go for a bike ride together, but actually, your training program says you need to do 80 miles, and they only want to do 50. What do you recommend? Go and hang out with your friends and have a nice ride, or go, no, I'm not talking to you. I've got to do my session. Where's the enjoyment balance in there, in that conundrum?
Yeah, exactly. So what I always say to every one of my athletes is, I try and I try and encourage them. When we set the training zones, we talk about what that means. So we didn't talk about it before, but threshold is approximately your best effort for 1 hour. So if you're going for a long bike ride, you've got to be below your threshold in theory. Or if you're above your threshold, it's less than an hour. But, if you meet your friends and you say, right, let's go for a 3-hour bike ride, I say to them, just go for it. Just enjoy it. It's about, if you want to do that and you're going to enjoy that, just go ahead and do it. And then afterwards, they'll get to learn whether they're at their threshold, below the threshold, above the threshold, when they look at it afterwards. And then you start to, have an awareness of, what training zone you're in. But, if you want to go out and do a big bike ride with your friends, it's just about enjoying the training that you do. It's a good point, actually. I was just talking to an athlete the other day, and he said he's come from a cycling background, and he said, I just really love the catch-ups that we have. He said, it's really good. We have a chat and you never tell me off. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I had a cycling coach and I used to sometimes do something different, and I'd get told off and I'd get shouted at in my catch-ups. And he said, you never shout at me. And I said, well, you know how to train. You've got to enjoy what you do as well. Training's about enjoying yourself. And I said, I'm never going to shout at you, but we just sit down, we talk about it, and we figure out if that was the right thing to do or not. But go out and enjoy yourself, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
No, it's a good point that the I guess different people respond to different things, and you can see at the elite level that maybe if you haven't done X, Y, or Z, then maybe a bit of a shouting is in order to get someone to achieve that maximum to a deadline. But for the majority of us out there, that's not likely to be the most productive way to grow and develop as an athlete and enjoy it.
Exactly. I mean, we do this for fun. But you want to get faster, you want to get better. But at the end of the day, life is stressful enough. If you're training on the top of it, you don't want to add additional stress, because training is additional stress. You've got to stress your body to get fitter and faster. And if you've got a certain amount of stress in your daytime, and then even if you think you're stepping back from your work life, you're still adding more stress onto your body, like physical stress. And that's the last thing you want to do. And, if you enjoy it, you still have the stress of it, but you're more likely to do it. You're more likely to just enjoy it. You're more likely to stick with it, and it won't feel like a chore. You'll get out there and just love it.
You're absolutely right about the stress there. That was something that another coach, Neil Henderson, pointed out. Exactly what you've just said, that the body can't differentiate between one type of stress and another.
Correct. Yes.
So exactly, a stressful day at work and an eyes out session on the turbo, the body, give or take, is getting a lot of the same stresses.
Yes.
And so this is where coming back to your earlier point, the professional versus the amateur issues can kick in, because
Yeah.
what works for a professional in terms of intensity and rest may not work for an amateur or an age grouper, because that rest time that the amateur or age group is getting might be packed with, looking after the kids, running them to different events, loads of other family pressures that we all have to deal with, social stuff, and work on top of that. You're not getting the same rest a professional athlete does. And you need to take that into account and not just keep pushing yourself through the floor on those sessions or all feeling bad about it.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's really cool things you can do now. I mean, I don't know if you've got one of the Whoop bands yet. But Whoop is basically, it's a little strap you can wear, and it measures your body strain. So what it can do is it can tell you how much strain, it tells you about resting heart rate and recovery scores and things like that. And it's absolutely superb for telling you how much strain you've actually had on your body. Whether if you've had a stressful day at work and then you go out and, do your turbo, then it all calculates that stress on your body. So you can quickly see in a really simple chart, how much stress you've had on your body. So you can see if you've had a stressful day at work and didn't train, that could be more strain on your body than you normally used to.
Yeah, and then trying to balance those things. So that Whoop band helps you with that kind of overall stress levels, does it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it actually measures your sleep really effectively.
Oh yeah.
It gives you resting heart rate, your heart rate variability as well, which is a really good score of how ready your body is to be able to train. And it gives you a percentage, but it also puts it really simply into red, amber, or green scores. So if it's green, you're fully recovered and you're ready to go for a hard session. If it's amber, then you can still train, but you've just got to be wary not to overdo it. And if it's red, your body needs to recover. So you can do an easy session or just take a rest day. And the cool thing about Whoop is you wear it the whole time. In fact, they've got a cool little charger that you just slide onto the Whoop band, so you don't even have to take it off at all. And it's brilliant. You just leave it on the whole time, and it just constantly measures your body statistics and then just gives you a score each day. And it's another thing to track, and it's quite cool if you're into technology, but it's a really good way of just telling you, giving you feedback on your total body stress, not just from your training. In fact, there's another podcast I was listening to the other day. I can't remember what it was, but it was called The Other 22 Hours. And, I don't train for 2 hours every single day, but imagine you train for 2 hours in a day. What happens in the other 22 hours of the day? So how much sleep you get, maybe you have a few drinks or you go partying, or, you're sat at your desk all day, they're creating stress on your body the whole time. So it's not just the training you have to be concerned about, it's every other, in fact, the majority of the rest of your life that is creating strain on your body as well.
That's interesting. I came across that with there's a project we've been working on with England football, and that's kind of what they've called it as well. It's like the 22-hour project or something. It's about how do we maximize the performance of the players when they're not playing? What are all the other things? This is feeding into marginal gains, and obviously we're working them on some nutritional stuff that they can try and incorporate in that time. But it's absolutely key. Your your life is your training, and it's all going to contribute to your stress score, and that's all going to affect how ready you are to train or not, how much you can absorb your training,
Yeah.
and ultimately how much you can benefit and enjoy from it. No.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the nutritional side of it is a good one. I mean, that's what you guys do. But, if you do that really hard training session and then, you have burger and chips or something like that, it's going to have a completely different impact on your body than having a really good recovery shake or something like that. So yeah, it's the other 22 hours is like I said, I don't even train for 2 hours every single day, but the 23 hours for me. But that is really contributing to what your body's going through.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors. The most excellent, most wonderful, most natural 33 Fuel Natural Sports Nutrition. Just remember, when you're looking for the best possible nutrition products for your performance, your health, and your well-being, get yourselves over to 33fuel.com. The stuff doesn't cost any more than ordinary sports nutrition. The difference is it's made with transformatively better ingredients. You've got tastier results, you've got better results, you've got healthier results. So look, get yourselves over to 33fuel.com. And now, let's get back to the show.
So for someone who's looking, we're getting to that time of the year. Well, we should be. I know it's a bit, weather's a bit rubbish today, but we should be coming into summer. There's some semblance of a race season coming back. For people who are looking to, hit race targets or up their game and their fitness over the next few months, what would you recommend in terms of a rough plan for frequency and intensity? How to balance that? Because particularly after being cooped up for so long, the temptation could be to go to what you see with a lot of your athletes. You said, just keep going hard all the time. And often that's going to lead to illness and or injury. Neither of which make you fitter. But how can people start to get an idea of balancing? Okay, I want to improve my fitness and get faster and hit some targets, but I don't want to get sick or injured either. Where should they start in looking at putting together the training and the intensity?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a big fan of Training Peaks. So Training Peaks is really good for monitoring. So there's every single workout that you do will calculate how much stress you've had on your body, and then it puts it into a fitness chart. And I use a training as what's the right word? A training duration called general fitness. So anybody who is training, all we do is work on just generally improving your fitness over time. Like I mentioned before, with these training zones, you've got your easy training, and then you just increase, as long as everything's going and you're not going okay and you're not getting injured, you increase the stress in your interval sessions over time. So you just generally get fitter. And with Training Peaks, what you can see, there's a chart, it shows you that you can see that you're getting fitter and fitter and fitter. And that's also mixed in with fatigue as well. So as you're getting fitter, you can see, how much fatigue your body's creating. So, if you're going too fit too quickly, you get too much fatigue and you're going to get injured. But then the best thing to do is train and just generally think about just getting fitter and fitter and fitter. Don't think about where you need to be in terms of your targets. Just get fitter and fitter and fitter. And whatever you get what you get, you don't get upset is another phrase that I heard. So, whatever fitness your body allows you to get to, that's where you get to. And then depending on the type of race that you're doing, whether it's sprint or Ironman, so the length of race, then you would start to do specific training leading up to the event. So then you'd start to do intervals at race pace. So if it's an Olympic distance, you might start doing long intervals at your threshold zone, which is the intensity that you're actually going to race at. And that gets your body ready for that race. And then it's just a case of tapering down to the event. But yeah, people have a tendency to think, oh, I've got a race in 12 weeks. I need to start smashing it and try and get fitter and fitter and fitter. Just keep that fitness increasing over time. Get to the point where you're going to start doing specific training. If it's a sprint, it might be 3 weeks out, 6 weeks out. Start to do those race replications and race practice, and that will build a lot of confidence going into the race, and it trains the intensity that you'll race at. And then just make sure you're nice and fit and rested for your race.
On that resting subject, the taper, another guilty zone.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not training.
Yes.
I'm not doing it. And then you have elite athletes who like, you look at the Giro d'Italia that's on right now, or any Grand Tour. They have a rest day. They go for a bike ride because, well, obviously they pretty much drop down dead if they didn't go out and do something. There's too much fitness in there.
Yes.
For the rest of us, not that we're spending our life on the sofa or anything, but how do you look at the taper, and how do you advise your athletes to manage it?
Yeah, so if we use Training Peaks, the example that I just mentioned before, is that calculates the stress of every single session on your body, and that's what generates your fitness chart. What I tend to do with people when they're coming into a taper is, you're right, the worst thing you can do is just stop training, because I just start thinking, oh, that's it, I just sit. It's not a case of sitting on the settee and doing nothing and just resting, because you start to feel like you're not training. But there's a real knack to getting that taper right. And what you can do is do short, sharp sessions. So do faster pace with shorter intervals and lots of recovery after it. One of my favorites for a run session is to do 1 minute intervals at your fastest pace that we train at, called repetition pace. So you do 1 minute at that pace, and then you might do 3 minutes of really easy running after it. Another 1 minute. So you might do that 5 times. So 5 times 1 minute with lots of easy running. By the end of the workout, because you've been running really fast, you feel like you've actually put a workout in. But because the majority of it's been at an easy pace, we know that it's not a lot of stress on your body. So you can still feel like you're going out there and training and putting some effort in. But we know that it's not going to be a huge stress in your body, and it allows your body to adapt to the training and recover going into that race. Everybody's different, so the best thing to do is just try the taper, and then just see how that works. In fact, the model that I try and work with people is working in 3-week training blocks. So you do 2 weeks of building up your intensity, and then you have an adaptation week, or some people call it recovery week. It's more adaptation, and you're letting your body adapt to the training. And then that adaptation week is almost like a mini taper each time, so that we know that your body recovers, and then you're ready to go again for the next 2 weeks. And then when you get to the actual taper, you've practiced this again and again and again in 3-week cycles, and then you know that taper is going to work for you. So if we need to reduce it even more, you might just do 3 1-minute intervals with plenty of recovery after it, just so that your body's going to adapt to it. But you're almost just practicing that taper every 3 weeks, and then you know what's going to work for you.
No, that's an interesting concept. The idea of breaking into the 3-week blocks, kind of and it's not like you're not having rest days within those 2 weeks where you're working harder, but that
Yep.
third week is almost a consolidation where you're really guaranteeing that you absorb the training. It's a nice touch, that.
It's a really effective model, because you train hard for 2 weeks, and then you actually become fitter when you let your body adapt to that 2 weeks of training. This is the way it was explained to me years ago, and I've tried it, and it works really well with athletes. Is that the more adaptation weeks you have in your training, the more your body stops and absorbs the training, you get fitter. So instead of training for 3 weeks and having a 1 week, then the more adaptation weeks you have in there, the more your body's going to adapt to the training, and the fitter you get over time. And to be honest, I used to do the 3 weeks plus 1, and by the time as you get to the end of 3 weeks, people are ready for a week, and it's the training's not really effective at the end of the 3rd week anyway, if you've got the intensity right. So 2 weeks of build with 1 week of adaptation works really, really well.
I really like that. I think that's it's a good way, particularly I think for anyone who isn't a professional athlete, i.e. basically all of us,
Yeah.
to make sure that we stay on the right side of really maximizing the benefit of the training, because without that recovery, you don't get fitter, uh, and balancing the risk of injury, but also allowing us to really get those charging sessions in, as well as spending time in the guilty zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just making sure you get that balance right, and yeah, the 2 weeks plus one works really, really well. And it also kind of lessens the likelihood that you're going to get injured as well. If you're doing 3 weeks of build, like I said before, like at the end of that 3 weeks, you're getting really tired. There's a real risk of injury. If you do 2 weeks and then you'd let your body adapt to the training, body becomes stronger, you're ready for the next 2 weeks, etc. And it's just a case of increasing that fitness over time, just increasing that general fitness.
And you're probably more excited to get stuck into the hard weeks again after having had the easier week, because whereas the hard weeks can be very rewarding, they can become overly daunting if they just keep on coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I told well, we started out talking about enjoyment as well, and a big thing for me is nobody should ever feel really tired. Sometimes when I see people download a plan off the internet, an Ironman plan, 24 weeks, and they go, right, I'm going to sacrifice 6 months of my life to train for this. They get to the end of the first week and they're, excuse me, and they just say, oh, I'm really tired though. The training's really good. And I said, you shouldn't be tired. You shouldn't ever feel tired when you're training for an event like that. It's a long time to train. And if you feel really tired at the beginning, that's only going to get worse. So, just back off on the volume that you're doing and just take it much easier and just build into it.
I tried, it reminded me of a magazine feature I did years ago for one of the fitness mags. I took on Chrissy Wellington's Ironman training program for a week. And I think it's a 23-hour training week. It was horrific. Like, just, I mean, it was never going to make me fitter, because I was working as well. Work and life were carrying on as normal, and I was fitting in sometimes 3 sessions a day, and it was brutal, exhausting, and there wasn't really much enjoyment in it apart from the satisfaction of having completed it and never ever having to do it again.
I mean, that's it. Like the elite people, they may train 3 times a day, but they sleep in between that, and you can't. I mean, they probably don't have to get up at like really early in the morning to do a swim before work, and then do something at lunchtime, and then that'd be stressful in the afternoon, and then do something in the evening. They get to eat and recover before the next training session. But more mere mortals, I don't think you can really go wrong with a good, really, an hour and a half each day. Let your body recover from that. And then, if your body's adapting really well to that, you can always build in 2 sessions per day. If you want to do that, you need to get the volume in. But you've got to do what your body can handle.
And that does bring us sort of quite neatly onto the topic of time as well. And I know we've touched upon timing elements earlier in the conversation, but I mean, around time and structure of training and making the most of that time, what are your thoughts around that subject?
Again, there's a few analogies here, but one of the best ones that I heard once is it's a bit cheesy, but a coach is like a sat nav. So, you put a destination and an origin into a sat nav, and it'll give you 3 different ways to get there. And, there's obviously the most direct route, and there's longer routes that you can take as well. And I think with a coach, hopefully they should help you have a much more direct route to get to where you want to go. So, if you're training effectively, you're training at the right levels, you should get there much more effectively. Ironically, I think it was Jack Daniels, a run coach, who once famously said, you can have talent, you can have motivation and a few other like principles, but actually the coach is the only one that can have a negative effect. So, if you have a really bad coach, you can actually go back in your training rather than forwards. But if you get the right coach, then really what should happen is you should get from that A to B in a much more direct fashion, and much more effectively and quicker.
So a good way, it's a nice way of putting it. That I like the sat nav analogy. So it's it in a way that having a coach can make more of your time, because you're able to create the most efficient and suitable plan to get from A to B without having to do all the thinking about it yourself, or even working out what the best way is yourself?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think most of the people that I work with, have full-time jobs as well. And, quite often what they say to me is, I don't need to think about, what training I'm going to do. I can just concentrate on my work throughout the day and then know that when they get to do their training, all they have to do is do the training session that I've set out for them. And then, that'll be, the most effective way for them to train. And, there's a real trust thing in the coach, because at the beginning, they might think, is this the right session, or they're not the right session. But after a few months of training, when they realize that the training's working for them and they're feeling much better and getting fitter by not being so tired, then they can just completely forget about the training while they're working during the day, and then know that just, then go and do their workout and, know it's going to have the best effect for them.
And triathlon is notorious for having three disciplines. Frankly, there's a bike to look after, there's swimming kit to look after, there's different locations to get to. There's the fourth discipline of trying to work out where everything goes on race day. That's before we get to nutrition. So within those logistics, fitting into a busy lifestyle, are there any tips you've got for ways to approach your training to make the most of that time, so you can sort of minimize your preparation and travel time and maximize your training and enjoyment time?
I think I think it's, I think it's something that's mentioned before, but I think is always make sure you've got the buy-in from your family as well. So, if you're gonna train for something, you've got to make sure that you make time. I mean, there's a couple of athletes that I've worked with, after a few months, they've just said, look, I can't do the training sessions at all. We've got a brand new kid, that kind of thing. I've got to look after them, so I just don't have time to train. So always it's about working with the athlete to figure out what kind of training we can do in the time they've got available, and just making sure that the small time that they have got to train is actually effective and the right session for them to do. Again, it's not always about them just going, right, I finished work today, I'm just going to go and smash it on a run and just run really hard. It might be the best thing for them to do an easy run, but at least they know that it's the right level for them to do it.
So in terms of, I'm sure some people have a treadmill at home, but most people these days, if they're taking their training seriously, they'll have a turbo trainer at home or access to one. Do you think the turbo is a valuable way of maximizing time, or do you think there's even a risk now that after lockdown, people are almost getting a bit too turbo happy and are spending too much time there, maybe even losing bike handling skills?
I mean, it depends what, with regards to bike handling skills, I think if you've got, decent skills already, I don't think you'll lose them by doing a lot of turbo training. But I'm a huge fan of the turbo trainer. I mean, all my interval training and, for some reason this year, the weather was absolutely awful. And, then we had lockdown as well. And I don't think I went out on my bike for about 4 months or something. So I was always doing the long sessions on a Zoom ride on a Sunday morning for 2.5, 3 hours even. And, with things like Zwift and, there's other ones out there, Trainer Road and stuff like that, and Sufferfest, you can do those applications and it just makes the time go a little bit quicker. But I'm a huge fan of the turbo trainer. You're right. You can just, if you've got one in your garage or set up already, you just literally can leave your desk, do some mobilization exercises so you're not going to get injured. Go and do your workout, get showered, and be back at your desk for the afternoon. So it's a really convenient way of training. And I've just had an athlete actually who he's only been out on his bike twice as well since I think about last October. He did all, because of the pandemic as well, he did all his training on turbo training and stuff like that. And he's literally just qualified for the ITU championships in Bermuda, off something like 2 training rides of about an hour, and then went and raced at the weekend. So, you can definitely train on turbo trainers, and they're really effective way to train.
I have a friend who, he's got 2 small children and work is very intense, and his work is across multiple time zones, so his days are long. There's a lot of Zoom and everything like that.
Yeah.
But where he lives, he's got a perfect 1-hour route out the door, so he knows that he can actually get out, hit a session. It's measurable because he knows it. He's back in within an hour, and it can, that's the only gap he needs in the day to squeeze that in, and that works for him. But that definitely feels like a rare situation. I know. Well, I'm in central London. I can ride an hour in any direction, and the only thing that's guaranteed is it's all going to be rubbish until I've got outside the M25, basically.
Yeah.
Turbo's been a lifeline for me. Without
Yes.
that, and I think it also really helps the measurability of the effort on the bike, because again, having a run background, I'm not as innately aware of my zones on a bike, whereas having
Yes.
the numbers right in front of you like that and the goals
Yeah.
push me a lot harder than I would on the road.
Yeah.
So no, it's been a good one, and certainly my favorite for the pain and pleasure, the Miss Whiplash of online cycling, if it were, is the Sufferfest.
Yes.
That's worked very well for me, and I know it can be a bit Marmite for some, I think, but
Yes.
that certainly, it has a sense of humour amid the horror.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the online training's not for everyone. Some people, the reason why they train is want to get away from things to get outside. And, with regards to running, I don't really mind the rain at all. So I'll happily just put a little rain jacket on and go for a run in the rain. It doesn't bother me at all. But, if you have the ability to train, independent of the weather. So, if you're going to train at lunchtime and do a bike ride and then suddenly it starts raining, you think, oh, I can't be bothered today. That's no fun and no enjoyment, like we mentioned before. But if you're going to go in the garage or your gym and then just jump on the bike, do an hour session, you're not going to get wet. You can cycle around Zwift or wherever your choice of turbo training platform is, then, it's much more enjoyable way to do it. And you can be consistent with it as well.
And again, that comes back to where you began on this, the idea that, through the enjoyment and the making the most of the time and balancing those things, you create the holy grail of consistency.
Yeah, exactly. Some people who hate training, I hate cycling in the rain. I can't think of anything worse. I've done it quite a few times and, I do sometimes, but, if it's raining, I just go, shall I do that today or shall I just go tomorrow? So, but if you can do it, in that controlled environment and, that's much more enjoyable and I'm going to stick with it and then, get the benefit from it. And I think you do get the same benefit from, a workout on the turbo trainer as you would if you went outside. I don't think there's any less benefit. I mean, slightly incomparable in terms of speeds and power and things, but I think there's a lot of benefit to be had from indoor training, which, I think is fantastic. And if it gets people consistently training, then, that can't be a bad thing at all.
Yeah, because I think it was an email recently from Ironman, actually, just one of their regular emails, and it was, the one holy grail of training that you've overlooked or whatever, and I'm like, I'm sure that's going to be consistency. And I opened it up, and what do you know? Of course, there you go. it was consistency, but
Yeah.
it's overlooked. Like, you can have all the focus you like, all the recovery you like, but unless you are consistent, it's just got to be layered on piece by piece by piece, and ultimately there aren't any shortcuts apart from regularly turning up and doing it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's lots of people talk now about HIIT training and going really hard for short intervals, and you can get lots of benefits from it. But, at the end of the day, if you're doing a triathlon and you're exercising for 2-3 hours, then doing 1-minute intervals might change some physical markers on your body. But if you need to be able to do that training that's specific to your event. And, if, like I said before, creating that volume of mitochondria at a nice, easy level is something that's going to benefit you in a triathlon. So, you need to consistently train, and the only way you can do that is by doing some hard sessions and some easy sessions, and just making sure you build that over time.
And looking at it, like you said, as it's a long-term project, and was it you get what you get and something? I've forgotten the quote. It was a nice line.
You get what you get. You don't get upset.
But it is that you're aiming for your race, but also this is fitness for the year. This is fitness for your life. It's not a sort of one-time drop a dress size and get into that cocktail dress for the wedding. This is a long-term project of you.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes what people do is they start by saying, I want to achieve this in a race, therefore I need to hit these times or this speed or this power or etc. And they start trying to get up to that far too quickly because they need to hit that. And if your body doesn't allow you to do that, you're going to get injured. So, that's my method. So we gradually we increase the volume of training, and sometimes we'll put in a hard week, and halfway through the week, an athlete might say, do you know what, I'm feeling this and it's making me too tired. And then we just back off, and we know where your limit is. So we know that you're training underneath your limit, so you're not going to get injured, but we know you're going to increase your fitness. And like I said, you just keep that fitness going, you get what you get, and then whatever your body allows you to do it. And then you just taper down and, you have your best race. But if you go too hard too quickly and you get injured, you've got to recover from injury, your fitness comes down, and it's all kind of, a terrible cycle that you get into. But nobody likes being injured because you can't train. And this is why we do it. We do it to be able to, even if you do it as a stress relief and then you get injured, you can't do that. So yeah, it's a really effective way to train.
Yeah. And so I know you're putting more resources out there for people. You're focusing more on the coaching side and building that even more than you have done previously. Where are the best places for people to connect with you, to find out your work and to see more of what you're doing, Mark?
Yeah, so obviously my website is the first place to go and have a look at, which is mr-triathlon.com. So mr-triathlon.com. That's the first place. And I've also got a YouTube channel as well, which I'll put details in for. I can't remember the exact link. And they're the best two places to go and have a look, really. So YouTube and my website.
Brilliant. Well, we will make sure they are all in the show notes. Along with some of the other resources that you've referenced as well, whether that's Phil Math, the Whoop Band, the whole lot. It'll all be down there for everyone to get stuck into. So all those links are there for you. Mark, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing all of your great knowledge around training. It's been a great conversation.
It's a pleasure as always. It's great talking to you, and it's great that people can hear some of the methods that we use and find more effective ways to train as well. So yeah, it's an absolute pleasure.
Mark Ryan, folks, give that man a great big hand. Hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. And you will find links to everything that we talked about, all the key resources and everything in the show notes below, as well as best places to get hold of Mark and even book him for a bit of coaching yourself if you would like to. Just one last piece of business to attend to. Do not forget to get yourselves over to 33fuel.com, where you will find simply the greatest natural sports nutrition on the planet. If you haven't tried it yet, you do not know what you're missing. And if you have, well, I'm sure we'll see you there again very soon. All right, look forward to catching you all on another episode. Thanks for joining me.